wanted to talk about something very profound that I came across from Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala, and Ibn Qudama rahimahullah elaborates a bit on this, about this idea of actually being able to prohibit backbiting, because there are stages, there are levels. And I want to start from this premise here. The believer thinks before they speak. The hypocrite does not think before they speak. In fact, Imam Hassan al-Basri rahimahullah said, the number one distinguisher between the mu'min and the munafiq, between a believer and a hypocrite, is that the believer's tongue is filtered by their heart. Before they say anything, it's behind their heart. They consider whether or not this is appropriate and whether or not this will benefit them or harm them, and then they speak through that. Whereas the hypocrite speaks first and then considers only if they find some sort of consequence in this life. So the very first basis here is al-ajratu min ash-shaytan. Hastiness is from the shaitan. If a person is very quick with their speech, they're going to make a lot of mistakes. And if a person talks too much, they're going to make a lot of mistakes. فَالْعَجْرَةُ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ means the pace at which you speak. Something comes up and you say something very fast. And the Prophet ﷺ said a person ends up in the depths of hellfire with a kalima la yulqi laha bala. He didn't even think about it when he said it. He said it so quickly, so casually. He just quickly said it, or quickly typed it, quickly commented. So if you're accustomed to quick commentary, you're most likely going to fall in this. And as Umar radiallahu anhu said, if you're accustomed to a lot of commentary, man kathura kalamuhu kathura saqtu. If you talk too much, you're going to end up making too many mistakes. And you're going to end up, man kathura saqtu, kathurat dunubu, wa man kathurat dunubu, kanat an-naru awla bihi. If a person makes too many mistakes, then their sins will pile up. And then if a person has too many sins, then hellfire becomes a more likely destination for them. So if you talk too fast and if you talk too much, you're likely to end up in trouble. So at the very minimum here, the believer has a process in which they think about what they're going to say before they say it. And especially when someone else's name gets mentioned. Why? Because if it's something sinful that you say that doesn't involve someone else, then the process of redemption, the process of tawbah at the end of the day comes back to only you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But once someone else's name was brought into it, then the process of tawbah becomes a lot more complicated. Of course, there is a path to tawbah, but it becomes more complicated. It becomes more difficult because now you have someone else that is involved. And so the believer especially takes precaution when someone else's name is mentioned. Once someone else's name is mentioned, the believer puts another filter there. And Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala, he was asked about how he himself, because he was known, and this is one of the signs of the Salihin, he was known that he wouldn't say anything bad about anybody. And by the way, subhanAllah, if you look at the righteous, and may Allah Azza wa Jal make us amongst them, and you think about their secrets, as Imam Malik rahimahullah used to say that every righteous person has a secret. Usually the secret is that that person does not backbite. That person will not say anything bad about anybody else. These are the secrets of the righteous people that meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their tongues remain free. So Al-Ghazali rahimahullah, he's asked about this and he kind of unravels this a bit. And he says, well, the first thing, he said, I don't mention anybody else's name, or I don't hear anyone mention, except that I imagine إِلَّا تَصَوَّرْتُهُ جَالِسًا أَمَامِي, except that I think of that person sitting in front of me before I say anything. That's the first line of defense here for backbiting, is that ghiba has some cowardice to it, doesn't it? It's cowardly. Ghiba is cowardly, right? That you say things about people when they're not there. And so the very first line of defense is, if that person is present, would you still say it? So he said the first thing is to imagine that person sitting there with you. Would you still be able to say the same thing about that person if they were sitting at the table?